Hello everyone, today I'm going to be reading Between Her Toes by JJJ. It's a sex and anthro story involving Big Mac and Apple Bloom, so it's an incest ClopFic. Without further ado, I am a little sick, so there might be some nostril noise in the background. Anyways, let's just hop right into it. Midnight Lover. Big Macintosh bit his lips as he tried to keep his groans down. He knew there was no pony for miles out in the apple orchard, but he couldn't be sure. Last thing he needed was to be caught with one hand rubbing and tugging away at his cock. He could theoretically explain away any pony catching him pleasuring himself, saying to any possible voyeurs that a hard-working stallion needed a little break from bucking all day. However, he sure as hell couldn't get away with explaining the picture he was masturbating to. Sure, all there was in the frame was a pair of feet, but it was who those feet belonged to that would raise the most amount of questions. He started stroking his cock even harder. His hand glided easily up and down his length. As it was slick with his pre-cum, his balls tightened at the thought of rubbing his cock against those soft, dainty toes of hers. Maybe tonight, Big Mac thought. Faster and faster he jerked himself, the image of those small little feet burning themselves into his mind. He could almost feel the warm soles rubbing against his head. He could almost taste their sweetie toes against his tongue. He could feel his orgasm slowly build up as he conjured up how musky they smelt, how warm they felt. His cock throbbed as his hand jerked hard as fantasy after fantasy piled up in his brain. He couldn't help but let out a light gasp as he finally came. Pit after pit of thick cum splattered across the orchard fields, painting the green grass white. Big Mac slowed down his hand as his breathing returned back to normal. With a quick look around to see if he was still alone, he pocketed the picture and pulled his cock back into his underwear. He stood up slow, giggling a bit as he felt his knees quiver. He smiled to himself as he returned back to his work. Definitely tonight. Apple Bloom yawned as she stretched her back. It's nice visiting the old farm after being away for so long. Ever since she got her cutie marks, she had made it her job to help all the little cults and fillies get their cutie marks too. From town to town, school to school, she'd counsel and help every blink flink find what they were truly gifted at. The downside, however, is that it barely gave her any time to visit her family. She was always on the go, always on the move. Fortunately for her, she was able to schedule herself a little break to go back and see every pony back in Ponyville. It was nice seeing the whole town again, seeing what had changed and what hadn't. She was ecstatic to see all those old familiar faces again. Watching Shirley teach the newest batch of students, seeing how the chorus still being both mysterious yet welcoming. She spent hours just pacing around town, the warm rush of nostalgia pumping into her veins as she continued her trek. She was dead tired when she finally made it to Sweet Apple Acres, though fortunately for her, she just happened to time her visit right when dinner was being served. It was the warmth of home that she missed, how comfortable she felt when Granny Smith smiled, the hot apple pie that filled her stomach, Winona's slobbering licks. It had felt nice finally being back after all this time. And that was until Applejack started her gentle ribbing, which at this point was to be expected whenever Apple Bloom came back to town. AJ was always a little peeved that Apple Bloom had decided to leave the farm when she became a full-grown mare instead of staying and continuing the family tradition. Though Apple Bloom knew that Applejack wasn't trying to be hurtful, it still annoyed her whenever she was being picked on, especially when Applejack brought up her looks. Apple Bloom could have sworn that the elements must have given Applejack some sort of magical boost in the looks department because her sister was walking, talking bombshell of a mare. Thick thighs hardened by years of bucking, wide hips just made for birthing out foal after foal, and the largest set of breasts in all of Ponyville. Needless to say, stallions were clamoring over themselves to get a piece of her apple pie. Unfortunately for Apple Bloom, Mother Nature was not so nice to her. She barely looked any different than when she left the farm. Still rain thin, still really short, and still as flat as a pancake. It was the last trait of hers that brought her the most annoyance. Compared to Applejack, there was no way she could compete. Whenever the two had gone out, it was always AJ that all the stallions talked to the point that Apple Bloom felt like she didn't even exist. Half the reason why she left Ponyville. Sure, she loved helping all those colts and fillies abroad to find out what was truly special about themselves, but Apple Bloom is a mare with needs, and those needs weren't exactly being filled while Applejack was around. Sure, she still gets mistaken for a 12-year-old once or twice or 5 times a month, but at least she gets some male attention. That said, there was always at least one stallion that she could count in Ponyville to give her that tender love and care she craves. Unfortunately for her, the particular stallion happens to be quite busy out in the apple orchard. No worries, thought Apple Bloom. I'll visit tonight. He always liked visiting at night. Apple Bloom smiled as she planned her little seduction. She would normally have taken a shower after being out in the sun all day, but she knew he would have preferred her with a nice coat of sweat. She stripped her work clothes off, chucking her drab dress, shirt, and long skirt into a hamper. The only good news about being so darn small in the chest department was that she could get away with not having to wear a bra. As she stood almost in the buff, she took the time to admire herself in her bedroom mirror. How the light kissed her soft curves, how her perky nipples looked oh so suckable, and especially how her face still had that youthful look. She was a lithe and petite mare. The only filly-like thing on her were those cute little pink panties she knew he'd like. But she wasn't done just yet. She sat on her bed and slowly pulled off her socks, sighing as the air kissed her aching feet. She knew exactly how to ensnare her big, tough stallion, and those 10 pretty little toes of hers were going to get her what she wants. She quickly turned off her light and peered out of her window, looking out on the now darkened field. Normally it would be hard to see, but the full moon bathed Sweet Apple Acres in its white glow. It took her a while, but after watching for any sign of movements, she caught him coming out of the barn. She smiled as she watched Big Mac strut his way towards the house. She missed his rough hands on her smooth skin, his warm tongue riding along her fur, and she definitely missed that giant monster of a cock he had swinging between his legs. She snaked one hand down to her crotch and softly touched herself with a memory of their past night. How he'd throw her down against the bed and make her his mare. How he'd pull on her hair as he thrust it deep into her tight pussy. And most importantly, how he'd completely worship her feet. She loved how she could make her Big Mac whimper with just a soft rub of her smooth soles against his dick. She rubbed faster as she remembers how he used to nibble on her toes, sending delightful little waves of pleasure. She could feel her orgasm fast as she remembers their favorite game, her pretending to sleep as he had his way with her. She almost was about to come when she heard the door open downstairs. She knew that only a few seconds before Big Mac would make his trek upstairs, and she definitely needed to get into position. As she clambered back into bed and her pussy ached to be touched, but Apple Bloom knew she only had to wait for a short while before Big Mac would take care of that need for her. She slid the blanket half across her body, exposing her tiny chest but covering her nether bits. However, she made sure that her feet stuck out of the blanket. Thump, thump, thump. She heard his footsteps as he climbed up the stairs. Apple Bloom put on her best sleeping face as her big brother approached her door. She held her breath, hoping that he'd walk in and not just go to his bed for the night. 1 second, 2 seconds, and then 3. There was nothing but silence. Apple Bloom grew nervous as she didn't hear anything. Is he still there? She thought. Does he still enjoy playing with me? That last thought frightened her. The idea that Big Mac didn't want her anymore was too chilling to bear. But fortunately, she heard her doorknob turn. She forced herself not to smile, lest she break the illusion. Big Mac looked at his little sister, sleeping softly like an angel. It had been a while since they had last met, and he took the time to admire her nude form. He felt himself get hard as he gazed upon her small breasts and her cute little face. His eyes glided downward until they rested on his favorite part of Apple Bloom, her soft, tiny feet. He quietly crept towards the bed, making sure not to make any noise. He carefully kneeled down, bringing her feet to her eye level. He always admired how completely different they were to his, how small they were, how unblemished they were, how her toes called out to be sucked. He placed his nose softly against her soul and breathed in deep. The smell was almost indescribable. It was a thick but feminine musk that fizzled through his nose and tickled his brain. The hours of walking Apple Bloom must have done gave her feet a slick coat of sweat, the cool wetness tickling his nose with each inhale. He knew just smelling her feet was not enough. Placing the tip of his tongue against her heel, he slowly dragged himself across the length of her foot, coating every taste bud with her salty taste. Big Mac took his time, placing quick kisses against her foot, nibbling away at her arch, ever careful to make sure he didn't wake up his sister. But Apple Bloom was fully aware of her brother's sneaky worship. It took all her strength to keep herself quiet as his rough lips smacked themselves against her soft feet. After making sure that every bit of Apple Bloom's soul was covered with his saliva, he turned his attention to his sister's tiny little toes. He wrapped his lips around her cute big toe, swirling his tongue against the appendage. Apple Bloom bit against her bottom lip hard, forcing herself not to make any noise. She loved the feeling of her brother sucking and nibbling at her toes, and the feeling was turning her on immensely. A slow wetness trickled out of Apple Bloom's pussy, and the mare desperately wanted to reach down and play with herself. But she knew that if she waited just a bit longer, Big Mac would take care of that problem for her on his own. Big Mac knew that he could barely hold on. Apple Bloom's feet were just too erotic for the stallion to bear. He needed his release. He quickly reached down into his pants, pulling out his now hardening cock. His massive head was soaked slick with pre-cum, and as the rush of air cooled his sensitive Big Mac shuddered as he placed his cock against her soft foot, letting out a quiet moan as her soft toes instinctively wiggled at the contact. His eyes had grown accustomed to the low light and drank in his little sister's small body, her lithe frame, her feminine face, and those adorable breasts. He couldn't help but drool at the sight of her resting there. She was almost angelic. And it was right then that Angel decided to strike. Apple Bloom carefully started to rub and wiggle her toes against Big Mac's sizable cock, each toe wrapping themselves around his oh-so-sensitive tip, causing Mac to spurt out a sizable bout of pre-cum. Try as he might to stay calm, he couldn't help but let out a moan, and with that he knew he couldn't wait any longer. In a rush, he unbuttoned his shirt and chucked it away before completely pulling off his pants. He grabbed Apple Bloom's other foot and pulled it towards his face, smelling in deep the sweaty musk of those feminine souls. He drew in those toes of hers into his mouth, licking and slobbering in an attempt to capture as much of her aroma as he could. Apple Bloom knew that her little play would pay off. She had her brother exactly where she wanted him. Giving a slight yawn and putting on a sultry tone, she spoke. "Oh, Big Mac, you're so weird. Look how dirty you're getting my feet." Big Mac simply groaned at the noise. She knew he loved it when she teased him about his fetish. Apple Bloom pulled her foot out of her brother's mouth, and before placing both feet against his now rock-hard cock, she slowly jerked off the stallion, gliding up and down the shaft slowly as her feet were soaked in his pre-cum and saliva. She watched as more and more clear liquid poured out of him as she worked his shaft with one foot while rubbing his head with her toes. Big Mac had enough. He grabbed her feet, held them together, and started fucking them as hard as he could. Apple Bloom loved watching her brother get so worked up over something as simple as just her feet. It made her feel beautiful, it made her feel powerful, and it definitely made her feel horny. She snaked one hand down her body and placed her fingers against her pussy, lightly rubbing her clit as he thrust it away. She could see how the veins in his cock bulged as he grew closer and closer to orgasm. All she needed to do was just push him just over the edge. "Are you about to come on your little sister's feet, Mac?" she said with a grin. "That's so gross, but I know it's pretty hot. Go on, Big Mac, come for me." Her words was all that Big Macintosh needed to hear. He thrusted harder and faster than before, moaning louder with every single push. With one long thrust he finally came, coating Apple Bloom's feet in a sticky white cum. Rope after rope landed against her fur between her toes and across her legs, but both Big Mac and Apple Bloom both knew that he was nowhere near done. He wasn't going to stop until he had her completely covered in his cum. Apple Bloom started playing with his cock again, rubbing his tip with her cum-covered toes. Big Mac groaned at the touch, clapping his eyes hard as he was still very sensitive after coming so hard. Apple Bloom loved the sight of how much control she had over Big Mac. With every glide of her soles against his shaft, Big Macintosh would groan. Every time her foot reached down to lightly rub against his balls, he would spurt a few more drops of pre-cum. She was always surprised with how much fluid Big Mac could produce. The air was filled with the scent of his masculine musk as her well-trained feet brought him once again to the edge. Just the sight of that big, strong stallion being all worked up over her little body sent such lovely tingles down to her now soaking cunt. She loved feeling the warmth of his manhood against her now cum-covered feet. She loved how he no longer bothered to keep his groans quiet. She loved the feel of his semen coating her body. Apple Bloom couldn't help but shove a few fingers deep inside her as she watched her brother swing his head back and close his eyes as he lost himself to the feeling. "Look at me, Big Mac," Apple Bloom said through deep, shallow breaths. "I want you to see me completely covered." Big Mac groaned as he forced himself to look at his little sister and see her body coated in a thick layer of white, and he knew that in just a few moments she'd be covered even more. Apple Bloom rubbed her pussy faster now, making sure to time her climax with Big Mac's own. It didn't take long for the two to push their way over the edge. Big Macintosh let out a heavy grunt while Apple Bloom let out a feminine moan as they both came. More semen than he thought was possible pumped its way out of Big Mac's body, adding to the now well-covered Apple Bloom. His cum splattered across her legs, her panties, her chest, and even made its way across her cute little face. But most of all, it pooled against her already soaked feet, painting her toes down to ankles in a thick layer of his love. Big Macintosh pulled himself out of his little sister's grasp and fell to his knees, desperately needing to catch his breath as the force of his last orgasm knocked the wind out of his lungs. He always loved playing with her feet, but he could never imagine coming that hard before. There was just something so hot about defining something so innocent. While seemingly innocent, Apple Bloom couldn't be happier knowing that her little plan worked hook, line, and sinker. The warmth of his cum covering her petite frame and the pheromone-laden scent hanging in the air filled her with a sense of pride. Let's see Applejack get a stallion to come like that, Apple Bloom thought. But fun as that was, she knew the night was still young. As she heard Big Macintosh breathing go from deep and labor to a quiet rhythm, she knew that he was ready for a lot more dirty fun. With a fake yawn and stretched, Apple Bloom flipped herself over, displaying her cute little butt to a tired Big. That was fun, big bro, Apple Bloom said in a sleepy tone. I'm glad my feet could help you after such a long day in the field. Maybe you could help me out a little. With that said, she wriggled her rump at Big Mac before pretending to fall back to sleep. She could almost hear Big Macintosh contemplated. On one hoof, he had just came before then. He had just came more than he ever had in his entire life. On the other hoof, he always loved fucking her while she slept. A second slowly passed and Apple Bloom could feel her lust clawing away at her. She didn't want him to just walk away. She needed him inside her. Just as she began to lose hope, she heard Big Mac stand up. Silence filled the room as Apple Bloom slowly prayed that he wouldn't just leave. But a smile quickly grew across her face as she heard the bed slowly creak as he slowly climbed on top of her small little body. Felt his warm cock resting against her butt cheeks. Well, I've always loved helping you out, Bloom, Big Mac whispered into her ear. Perfect, thought Apple. The end. Well, that was a lot of freaking footplay, okay? Anyways, hopefully you guys have enjoyed this little ClopFic, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great night.
100,000 stories have filled my head as I look for the answer